Yeah. Awesome. It looks like we are getting ready to go live here. Da 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 da.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Not now. Let's see. Okay.
Okay. Got it. Got to click on it, right?
Yep, we clicked on it. It's all good. We can see you and everything's
Got it.
perfect.
Okay.
All right. We're here celebrating today the beautiful book that Barbara Shaw Miller has written. And there's quite a story behind this. So I'm Becky with Spotlight Publishing. This is Barbara Miller. And we are just excited to share this wonderful book. Do you have it sitting next to you?
I do indeed.
Awesome. Can we see
I can
it?
see it.
There we go. Up a little.
Okay. All right, this way. There it is.
Pilferage of the Capes. And she says this book is fiction based on fractional truths. Barbara, let's hear the story about how this book came to be and what was involved in getting this book out to the world. Because I know this was quite a process.
Okay, what did you say? I'm sorry.
Okay, so how did this book come to be? I know
Oh, okay.
This has been a long process in getting this book out to the world.
Yes,
and
it has been.
Where did it start? Where did it start?
Probably in the mid 80s, when I met this gentleman in Tucson, Arizona, and he was referred to me from another man, and so forth. He wanted to tell this story to the world, and he couldn't. He was scared to death to tell the story. But with me sitting in a quiet restaurant, he started to feel comfortable, and he had these papers on his desk in front of him on the table, and they were wrinkled and all messed up. But he sorted them out, and he had little notes in Spanish throughout the story. He told me of these two fellows who were archaeologists who flew in, one from Israel and the other one was a native of Guatemala. And they wanted to be archaeologists, famous archaeologists. But in particular, one who discovered the library of the southern Mayan civilization. He went on to say that these men suffered tremendously. They were over 40 years in this research and in this process of going through the jungles and coming back with a little piece of story, or no monoliths, no Mayan civilization. How did they find this out? Well, one day, Mr. Epstein, who was one of the gentlemen living in Guatemala, and Arch, who was came from Israel, Dr. Epstein saw a man walking through Guatemala City, pulling an old wagon, but it was loaded with what he thought were monoliths from Mayan civilization. So he raced out of the apartment and he asked the man where he got them. He said, "I did them myself. They look just too authentic to this archaeologist." He bought the whole cart, moved it into his apartment, called Arch right away and said, "Get to Guatemala immediately." He did. They looked him over together. They were hesitant. They took it to the director of archaeology in Guatemala City, and he said, "Oh, I think they're fakes, but I'll tell you what, I'll let you send them to an archaeologist in the States and see if they're really true." Great. They jumped on the plane and took the things into the States. And guess what? They were real, according to the archaeologists.
Wow.
So they got them. Anyway, once they found that out, well, they were just back on the plane to Guatemala City, and then trying to find this little old man who carted them around in a wagon. And they couldn't find him, but they found other people who talked about it all the time. There were people in town who knew what he was doing, thought he was a fake, but they knew what he had. They said he lived out of town. So right away, they hired a guide and an expedition team to go into the jungles. Got into the jungles. This goes over and over again. Each attempt was murderous to them. It was a poisonous jungle. You're dealing with guerrilla warfare. You're dealing with native warfare. You're dealing with poor farmers who are trying to make a living and had to fight off all these people. You're dealing with two really naive archaeologists who walking the paths. Remember, this is a jungle, and the only thing they had to clear the path was a machete, which was a large blade, as you know, and they cleared the path with the blade. But they saw so much on the way. They saw corpses everywhere they turned. women with bare-chested women with barrels on their head and babies on their back. And you wondered how they survived. Well, they lived in a little village, and they found this little village, and they discovered that this was not where the Mayan, the artifacts were from, but in the caves in the Guatemala mountains, that's what the man said they were. Anyway, they hired from several other guys. They heard that different rooters, one was using them to an advantage, buying some of these things, but using the money to pay other people to get him some artifacts. And they discovered that they had several going. So they went back to the Guatemala City, got those sent out to museums and what have you. That was their first attempt. I'm going around the circle, but that was the first attempt they had. These things were worth thousands of dollars. No one knew this, but they were getting lots of money for them. They started sending to Madrid, I think it was, and then they also went up to Guatemala. I mean, not Guatemala, excuse me, to Paris, and they got them sold to the museums there. He told me, this man, there were 3 of them. Other areas where I've studied this, I found 5 of these are codexes. What a codex is a book that the Mayans prepared and wrote their stories inside. But that was the inside bark of a tree. That was their, and the inks, I still don't know what they called it or how they did it. But they wrote with ink, and Tom was telling me he did a study and he saw that they were actually sharpening branches of trees and writing into the bark with the branches.
Wow.
Anyhow,
how
that's
innovative.
But that's how they recorded their lifestyles, how they prayed to they had 150 gods that they prayed to. And each god was numbered. Number 1, number 2. Number 2 might be the senior age and how do we take care of them. Number 1 might be the beginning of a lifestyle. Number 3 was the aged, and 4 were various careers that they could take. But they were smart. They knew they knew what was going on. Anyway, that's the Mayan civilization. I have not studied the Mayan civilization. I only studied what this gentleman told me and tried to discover the truth of it. I did, in fact, in my research, discover that they were right on. He was right on many things, but I couldn't identify dates, and nobody that I could talk to would give me any information. And also today, they're all dead. I can't go back and verify anything. I can see how they were dead, and it's a wonder these guys came through. As I went through the story, I had a cousin, right? He's a member of SAG, and the Screen Actors Guild.
Right.
And I sent the script to him, and I said, "What do you think?" And he said, "You got everything in there, but you don't have a dame. You gotta get a dame." So I said, "Okay." So I sat down and I thought, well, I'll find an Indian lady and put her in there somehow, and they'll meet, and there's their love affair. And that was that. That's how that came to be. But there was a lot of illnesses that occurred in this. It wasn't a pleasant trip. It was a very rough trip.
Well, probably in the forest or in the jungles, there's mosquitoes and all kinds of creatures, and all the things that would come about from that. Plus the dampness, the wet, everything.
Yes, it was. It's fanatic to me how they could actually keep going. This arch was incredible. First of all, he lost Dr. Epstein, which is the archaeologist from Guatemala. He died. He died of cancer. That was verified. The second gentleman that he identified, I couldn't find him at all. And then the director of archaeology in Guatemala City had retired tremendously. He was very, very old. He couldn't even talk to me on the phone. And then it just went on like that. So factual truths, that was it. Actually, I could verify the story, but I couldn't document it that well. Kind of likens it to the movie Cleopatra. He said, you knew she was real because she was there in history, but you don't know what really went on.
What's going on in that life?
Anyway, I guess the middle of the book goes on into discovering another guide who was very, very, very good. But he had a family on a farm in Guatemala. And he was very worried for his family because he heard about the wars guerrillas were beating the army was beating up the Indians were beating, it was always some war going on, and these guys are trying to stay out of it. Periodically, they would be traveling along and they'd see mirrors and swords where they were signaling, people behind him were signaling the people ahead of him. So they knew they were in trouble, but they kept their heads low, and they managed to get through each one of the processes. I hate to give you the ending. I don't want to go into that, but it was a strenuous position for Art. He got stuck with the worst of it. He tried to work with the director of archaeology in Guatemala, and who was close to the president, who was behind his back telling him all kinds of things. And although these people promised him, this government would promise them both that they would be the first people to announce the discovery of the Mayan civilization or unlock the keys to the Mayan civilization, neither one would keep that promise. And when it became to get, urgent that he'd say reduce it, Arch was put in prison. So he went to jail because they put him in prison for whatever, I don't know, but he was there for a couple of months. He became sick. Meanwhile, Mr. Taylor, who was sponsoring them financially for these whole expeditions, and who had hired, by the way, Rene, who's the man who told me the story. He was a super guide, apparently, and quite popular for his expeditions throughout Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, and so forth. He hired him to take Arch through the jungle again, and he did it. And this man said to me, Barbara, I saw it, and I know that Arch saw the libraries before he left Honduras, because most of the caves were in Honduras. But the borders of Honduras, the borders of Guatemala were protected by the army. You couldn't get through. Sound familiar? Anyway, they couldn't get in and out of these countries that easily. And the mountains were dense. They were extremely high. If you wanted to see what was around you, you had to climb that mountain to get it. No one can appreciate what I think I sensed. It was really a very difficult journey. But anyway, bottom line is all these people are dead. And
they really missed getting this story out to the world the way they would have liked
to. They
did,
yes. Yes. And that's what he did. He made me promise that I would put it in writing. And I promised him I would, but that was quite a while before I got it, before I'm here. After I had received all that information, I had some, I call them life experiences, changed things around a little bit. And I couldn't quite get back to the book, but I would work on this periodically off and on. And then of course, the time came when I'm getting old, I'm getting aging, but I fell and I broke my hip. And then I broke my femur in the one leg. So that took about 4 months to heal, right? 4 months. And I got that all set. My son was killed. Oh, we had one incident after another. But now I'm settled down. I've had enough recouping. I want to get my legs going again. And I'm on my way to recovery. And guess what? This book is going to make it happen. It's made me very, very happy to see it. I love the cover. I love the book. I love what you've done to it. And you're quite a lady, my dear. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, to me, just to watch you through this journey and the very fact that you stuck with it and got this story out to the world is phenomenal, because I'm sure it must have been at some point a little bit, the thought of even bringing it to the world, a little bit scary.
Yes.
Just because, there were a lot of people that lost their lives as a result.
That's
of
right.
This. Wow.
It didn't last. It was, and this is what was Rene's serious concern was for me. He said, you better, and he kept looking over his shoulder in a restaurant, but he kept saying, Barbara, I'm very worried. You have to be careful. And I thought, why are you asking me to do this?
Why me?
He said, there's somebody else around here. Anyway, I promised him I would do it. And I finally got around to it. About 3 or 4 years ago, I started writing it. And I'd write a little bit and then I'd write a little bit. And I finally met you, and that was encouragement enough for me to get the big thing done.
Oh, that is amazing. So I know life always comes to us, and lot of things that happen throughout the years. Tell us about what you've lived a long life and the accomplishments that you've been able to enjoy. I know you wrote another book as well.
Yes. Yes. Well, I've 48 years I worked, and I did, and I was multiple corporations, but always in a position where I was close to the high degrees. And I was allowed certain disciplines, certain things that I could do. I could travel quite a bit. The first job that I did was when I was an innocent real estate appraiser. I was approached by Prentice Hall. They sent me a letter and said, would you kindly be pleased to write a letter about the appraisal process? And I said, sure. And I wrote it. And I wrote it, but it took 3 years. 3 years of my after work every day, and Easter's, Christmas, Thanksgiving, all these days, prepare a meal and run out. But I got it done. And they seemed pleased. They put together a team, others that wrote other stories, other textbooks. And this was to be a textbook, and it is. It was, that was it. They sent us to Europe. We visited several universities throughout Europe. And then I left there, and I went with Mr. Ludwig. D.K. Ludwig was a multi-billionaire in New York City. And he bought up all the savings and loans in Arizona, and home in Dallas, and what was the other one in Salt Lake City? American in Salt Lake City. And I was the head of the appraisal department in Phoenix, but he asked if I would take on the other 3 appraisal departments. And of course I said, sure. And then when that happened, then he asked me to be project manager for a new development he was starting in Westlake Village, California. So every Wednesday, hunt time, I'd board a plane, fly over to Westlake, rent a car, drive to the project, drive back, fly back home. That was every Wednesday. And that was Mr. Ludwig. From there, a man approached me from Vietnam. He continued to be for years a dear friend of both Tom and I. But Dr. Winman Lee was what was he? He was deputy or minister of the oil industry in Vietnam before the war. Remember, before the North invaded the South. And when that happened, he was put in prison and beaten up, and then he escaped and took a rough boat ride across the ocean to Mexico. From Mexico, he crawled up into the United States. And he communicated with several people. They all seemed to come over. The ones that escaped Vietnam came over to California, where they either resided or got homes or rented in Garden Grove, California, which is Westminster. And they settled. That was their community. They settled. So he was there. He bought a home there. He was there. He came to Phoenix, and I was introduced to him, and he said, would you come to Vietnam and China with me, or China first and Vietnam? And what do I need to do? And he said, well, teach them the appraisal process. Well, that was right up my alley. So I said, sure. This sure has got to come out of my vocabulary. But anyway, I went. And I went to China, and it was interesting, the projects there. I don't know if I should tell them or not, but the first one was a Professor Han at the Beijing College of Business and Arts. And I went in there, and language was very difficult barrier. At that time, remember, this wasn't the young boys who went to Dartmouth and Princeton and Yale and Harvard. These were the old men that came up the hard way. Mm-hmm. And they were difficult to talk to, but then they seemed to like it, didn't they? Professor Han made me an honorary professor of the college. And then I went to Vietnam with Dr. Lee. And we worked with several of the people in Hanoi. I met Ambassador Peterson, who was ambassador from the United States to Vietnam. And got to chat with him. I got to chat with a lot of nice people. The other was the chairman of the Communist Party, which was very different than the people I was working with. And very nice man. We talked. And then he took me to lunch. He didn't, but someone else took me to lunch. and the mayor of Dalian, China, was there. And he asked if he could serve me. And I said, yes, I'll have that bagel. And it wasn't a bagel. It was, what was it? I told you. Anyway, they all laughed because that was not a bagel. But anyway, from there, I met some people from Disney Corporation, some people working with Disney. They wanted to put a Disney World in China. But where they wanted to put it, I advised them against it because it was a seeking soil. And they wanted to build $1 million project, house project. They wanted to put it in a feedlot or near a feedlot. And I couldn't see that at all. But they didn't know. And but I told them that was fine. Came home from Vietnam, and then I was sent to Japan. Not by who sent me to Japan? Not by Dr. Lee. I went to Japan, and there I met a man by Nobuo Kakanuma. Nobuo Kakanuma was a very wealthy Japanese man who was also chairman and put together the Japan Korean, at that time, Korean Welfare Buddhist Association. And they asked me to work with their WTO, the World Trade Organization, to put together a system where they could return a monument that the Koreans stole from the Japanese. No, Japanese stole from the Korean, I'm sorry. And they had it in Japan. He wanted to return it to Korea before he died. I never could make progress with it, with the WTO. I really failed on that one, but
Managed to.
Huh?
They managed to do it.
but they managed to get the monument back, which was, you had to meet Dr. Nobuo. Becky, he was the most wonderful man in the whole world. He really was. He was just genuine, wasn't he, Tom? Genuinely friendly. And he's died. But since then, Masa Nakajima is replaced him. And Masa called me and said he wanted Tom and I to stay on the board. I said, fine, no problem. But Masa came to Arizona and spent a week with us at our home. And he had a ball. There was this young Japanese guy who's only been trained in Japanese schools. We got him dressed up in a cowboy hat and boots and Levi, put a fake gun around his belt, and he went home on that long air flight and didn't change his shoes for his shower. He was going to wear that outfit home, wasn't he? He was so cute. Anyway, that
what a
it was
colorful life.
Yeah, it goes on. It goes on. It's ridiculous, but I don't want to tell you the whole story. It's kind of.
Well, no, it's a beautiful story, and it's fascinating because you lived a very interesting life. A very, a lot of accomplishments, a lot of, look at all the traveling you did. That's pretty amazing. Yeah,
I had
in a different time than now.
Oh yeah, time zones were different and differently, and the frequent flyers, I had them coming off the table. There were so many. I had 150,000 just with Korean Airlines. I don't remember how many I had with Japan or even it was Japan, and then it was Manila. But when I flew down there, I went to Boho, the island of Boho, landed the plane in Manila, had to cross to the other side of the island to get one of these air floating boats. What do they call those?
Yeah, airboats.
Airboats. And I sat in a straw bale of hay to drive all the way 2 hours to Boho Island, where I met the Honorable Martin J. What's his name? Oh gosh, I remember Martin J. Well, I'll think about it. Anyway, Cornito, that's his name. He wanted me to help him raise money for his foundation, which is what he lived in Jakarta, Indonesia, but he flew over to Boho and met me on the way down. I looked at him like this wasn't my home. And he had guys next to him with guns in their hips. And I just thought, oh, okay. I didn't know how to, I had to kind of make up well, I don't know. I'll do it. And finally he came back. He sent another girl back over to meet me about 3 months later. He hadn't heard from me. He wondered why not. And I was very honest with her. I said, it's asking for money for a foundation is difficult. I can lend you money for good, strong reasons, but that's not one that's acceptable at the time. What you need is a private investor, and that's what she needed. And she went back, and I told him that, but he didn't understand it. But she went back and she emphasized that was a problem. That was it. And after that, I decided I've had enough, haven't I? I said, I've just had, when I got a phone call from Walter in Taipei, and he happened to know me from another reason. And he said, we'd like you to come to Taiwan for a special meeting. And I want to make sure that you're there because I think you can give an influence at the meeting. I flew to Taiwan. They had dogs smelling the chairs. And I thought, here I go again, another journey. And I sat in the chair and we had that meeting, didn't we? And we came back from Taiwan, and from there, me and Tom and I started taking Tom with me quite a bit because I didn't like going alone in some of the places I was going to. But we went to, I was put on a committee to bring on a new board of directors for them. And Tom and I flew to Arkansas, and our chairman of this committee was Mike Huckabee, who at that time was the lieutenant governor of the state of Arkansas. And it was interesting, the stories he told, huh, Tom?
About the Clintons.
About Clinton. He had some real fun stories to tell.
Wow. Crazy world. What a crazy world.
Yeah. That was my life, I guess.
Well, it's a life of adventure, and I'm sure has given you lots of memories and some smiles and some kind of, what did I do that for?
Why did I do that? Nuts.
Well, congratulations to you on bringing this book to the world. It's a piece of history, international intrigue, really, for these artifacts and what happened to them. And it's been such a pleasure working with you. And I know Tom's working on another little book of his own, a children's book, and perhaps you'll have another one coming out at sometime soon.
Very good. Very good. We will, I think. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, what a beautiful interview, and thank you for bringing all this to the world.
Thank you.
How you've shown up in the world is remarkable.
Thank you. Really, very much.
Very good. Congratulations on your book. For those that are listening or will be listening, you can get the book on Amazon, and you just type in Barbara Shaw Miller or just type in Pilferage of the Caves and you'll find it. It's a beautiful book. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
You have a beautiful rest of your day.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear you.
Have a marvelous rest of your day.
Okay. I will. Thank you too.